My phone buzzed against the hospital bed just hours after doctors told me I might not survive the week. I thought it was someone checking if I was still alive. Instead, it was my father's message. "At least your life insurance will finally pay out." Then he laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not an awkward joke. A real, heartless laugh, while he lounged beside a pool in Las Vegas, sipping cocktails as I lay in the ICU wondering if I'd ever breathe without machines again. In that single moment, I realized I had never been their son. I had only ever been their wallet, their backup plan, their human ATM. And the worst part? They still expected me to keep paying for everything. What happened over the next few days destroyed my family forever, and it all started with that one text message I can never forget. "My name is Sloan. I am 28 years old, and I work as a data forensics specialist for a major cybersecurity firm on the East Coast. My entire career is built on digging through layers of encrypted code to find the truth people try to hide. I recover deleted files, trace hidden financial transactions, and expose corporate lies for a living. It is a job that requires cold logic, endless patience, and a relentless pursuit of facts. The bitter irony of my life is that while I am undeniably brilliant at seeing through the deception of strangers on a computer screen, I spent my entire adult life being utterly blind to the lies told by the people who shared my DNA. I let them use me. I funded their delusions. And it took facing my own mortality for me to finally open my eyes. It all shattered on a Tuesday morning at 4:12 in the morning. I was lying in an intensive care unit at the city hospital. The air in the room was sterile, smelling faintly of bleach and rubbing alcohol, and the ambient temperature was freezing. Yet, my skin burned with a fever that felt like liquid fire rushing through my veins. A chorus of medical monitors beeped in a chaotic rhythm around my bed, a warning soundtrack that told me my body was actively losing the fight. What had started just 3 days prior as a severe case of pneumonia had rapidly and viciously spiraled into sepsis. My organs were struggling. Every shallow breath I took felt like inhaling crushed glass, and my hands shook violently beneath the thin cotton hospital blanket. Nurse Tamsin, a kind woman with tired eyes and a gentle touch, adjusted the intravenous drip in my bruised arm. Her movements were practiced, but her silence was terrifying. I could see the profound pity in her expression every time she looked at me. In the intensive care unit, having family around is not just about comfort. It is a vital part of keeping a patient anchored to life. The nurses rely on family members to talk to the patients, to hold their hands, to keep their spirits up when the body wants to give out. But the chair next to my bed was empty. The small visitor sofa in the corner was empty. It had been nearly 48 hours since I was admitted through the emergency room, and I was entirely, desperately alone. I reached for my phone on the plastic tray table with a trembling hand. My fingers felt thick, clumsy, and foreign as I unlocked the screen. I needed a familiar voice. I needed my father, Orson, to tell me I was going to be okay. I needed my mother, Vera, to hold my hand and smooth my hair. Even a message from my younger sister, Blair, would have been enough to ground me. They lived less than 3 hours away by car. A normal family would have dropped everything, jumped in their vehicles, and sped down the highway the moment they heard the word sepsis. I opened my messages, expecting a flood of panic texts asking for room numbers, visiting hours, and medical updates. Instead, there was nothing. No missed calls. No voicemails. Just an empty screen staring back at me. My heart pounded frantically against my ribs, setting off a rapid alert on the heart monitor. I tapped on my father's contact and pressed call. It rang twice and went straight to voicemail. I tried my mother. Voicemail on the first ring. Finally, desperate for any sign of life, I opened a social media app, thinking maybe they had posted something about being on their way to the hospital. Maybe they were in transit and did not have cell service. The first thing that loaded on my feed was a photo. It was a vibrant, high-resolution picture of Orson. He was standing by a sunlit, sparkling blue pool, wearing a pristine white polo shirt, holding a martini glass up to the camera. He had a wide, carefree grin on his face, his skin tanned and relaxed. Behind him, My mother Vera was lounging on a cabana chair, holding a champagne flute, wearing designer sunglasses I had bought for her last Christmas. The location tag clearly read the name of a famous five-star resort and casino in Las Vegas. The caption beneath the photo read, "Living our best lives." Nothing beats a spontaneous weekend getaway with the family. Life is too short not to enjoy the luxury. I stared at the screen. My vision blurred, not from the high fever, but from the crushing, suffocating weight of betrayal. They were in Vegas. While I was suffocating under an oxygen mask, fighting off a deadly bacterial infection, they were drinking overpriced cocktails in the desert. And the worst part? I knew exactly how they paid for that trip. They used the premium emergency credit card I gave them last year. The card that was strictly meant for medical emergencies, sudden home repairs, or genuine crises. My hands shook violently as I typed a message to Orson. I am in the intensive care unit. My organs are failing. The doctors say I might not make it through the night. Why are you in Vegas? I watched the three little dots appear on the screen, indicating he was typing. My breath caught in my throat. I waited for the apology, the panic, the promise that they were booking the very next flight home to be by my side. The notification chimed. I opened the text message. At least your life insurance will finally pay out. 7 words. No emojis. No follow-up message saying he was joking. No indication that it was a sick, twisted misunderstanding. Just a cold, calculated, brutal response from a man who saw me not as a dying daughter, but as a winning lottery ticket. The beeping of my heart monitor spiked dramatically, joining the frantic thudding in my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the tears to come. I had spent years practicing stoicism, reading philosophy, trying to convince myself that I could control my reactions to external events. I told myself that family dynamics were complex, that they loved me in their own flawed, imperfect way. But right then, lying in that sterile bed, facing the very real possibility of my own death, the stoic walls crumbled into dust. I did not cry. The tears simply refused to form. Instead, a profound, icy clarity washed over me. The fever seemed to fade into the background, replaced by a deep, hollow, terrifying realization. They did not love me. They never did. I was merely an automated teller machine that occasionally breathed and spoke. And right now, the machine was breaking down, and they were already counting the scrap value. That single text message snapped the invisible chains of guilt I had worn for 28 years. If I died tonight, they would mourn the loss of my wallet, not the loss of my soul. They would use my funeral as an excuse to garner sympathy and cash in on the insurance money to fund more casino trips. But I was not dead yet. The fire in my veins shifted from infection to pure, unadulterated rage. And if I survived this, I swore to whatever higher power was listening that they would never see another dime of my money. The safety net was gone. It was time to let them fall. Will they even realize the net is gone before they hit the ground? Lying in that hospital bed, the silence of the room became a vast canvas for my memories. When you are hovering near the precarious edge of oblivion, your mind has a funny way of organizing your life into a neat, chronological museum of regrets. And my personal museum was filled to the brim with exhibits of profound financial exploitation. Growing up, I was always the invisible child in our household. I was not the prettiest, nor the loudest, nor the favorite. That prestigious title belonged exclusively to Blair. Blair was 3 years younger than me, a golden child who never did any wrong in the eyes of Orson and Vera. While Blair was handed everything on a silver platter, excused from chores, and praised for simply existing, I learned early on that my worth in our family was directly tied to my utility. If I fixed the family computer, I was a good daughter for the day. If I helped pay the utility bills from my part-time high school job at the local grocery store, I was praised. It conditioned me to believe that love was a transactional currency. If I just provided enough, worked hard enough, and gave enough, surely they would eventually value me the way they valued Blair. By the time I landed my first major role in the tech industry at 22, I was making a starting salary that completely dwarfed my father's annual income. And that was when the subtle emotional manipulation escalated into outright, systemic robbery. Let us take a tour of Exhibit 1 in my Museum of Regrets, the luxury car. 2 years ago, Orson claimed his old sedan was breaking down and he desperately needed a reliable vehicle for his commute to work. He sat me down at the kitchen table, sighed heavily, rubbed his temples, and talked for an hour about how a man his age should not have to worry about breaking down on the side of the highway in the freezing rain. He did not ask for a loan directly. He was far too proud and manipulative for that. He just painted a pathetic, embarrassing picture until the guilt gnawed at me so badly I could not sleep. I ended up co-signing a loan and setting up automatic monthly payments from my account for a premium, fully loaded SUV. $40,000. I paid off a $40,000 vehicle so my father could look wealthy to his golf buddies and project an image of success, all while I took the crowded subway to work every single morning to save money on parking. Moving on to Exhibit 2, the influencer illusion. Blair fancied herself a lifestyle creator and social media influencer. She adamantly refused to get a traditional job, claiming that sitting in a cubicle would stifle her creative process and ruin her mental health. But luxury aesthetics cost real money. When she threw a massive, screaming tantrum about her studio apartment being too small and ugly to film content in, Vera called me weeping hysterically. She told me Blair was severely depressed, that she was failing at her dreams, and that as her older, successful sister, it was my moral duty to lift her up. I caved. I always caved. For 3 long years, I paid $2,500 a month to cover the rent for Blair's downtown high-rise apartment. I funded the beautiful, minimalist backdrop for her fake online life. She never once thanked me. She just assumed it was her birthright to live in luxury on my dime. And finally, Exhibit 3, the medical emergency that never existed. Just last year, Vera called me in a sheer panic, claiming she needed a crucial, specialized procedure that their basic insurance would not cover. She was vague about the exact medical details, crying softly into the phone about how she was in constant physical discomfort and feared for her long-term health. Terrified of losing my mother, I immediately wired $15,000 directly to her bank account without asking to see a single doctor's note. 2 weeks later, I took time off work and drove down to visit her, expecting to find her recovering in bed. Instead, I found her recovering not from a vital, life-saving surgery, but from a premium facelift, Botox injections, and extensive cosmetic enhancements. When I confronted her, trembling with anger at the deception, she manipulated the narrative seamlessly. She cried, saying her aging appearance and dropping self-esteem was a severe psychological issue, and asked how dare I, a successful, youthful woman, deny my aging mother a shred of confidence in her twilight years. She made me feel like a monster for questioning her vanity. I lay there, staring at the square ceiling tiles of the intensive care unit, tracing the porous patterns with my eyes. The truth was ugly, but ignoring it had almost literally killed me. I had funded their grand illusions. I had insulated them from the harsh consequences of their own laziness, vanity, and financial illiteracy. I genuinely thought I was being a good daughter. I thought I was slowly buying a permanent seat at the family table. But I was never a guest at that table. I was just the hired help footing the bill for the banquet. The message from Orson was still glowing on my phone screen. At least your life insurance will finally pay out. I took a slow, agonizing breath. My chest rattled with fluid, but my mind was sharper and colder than it had been in a decade. They were currently sitting in Vegas, running up room service bills, ordering expensive drinks by the pool, laughing under the neon lights, all while assuming that my direct deposit would hit their accounts on Friday as usual. They thought my sense of obligation was infinite. They thought my tolerance for disrespect had no actual limit. I was about to teach them a devastating, permanent lesson in boundaries. The anger inside me was no longer a burning, chaotic flame. It had condensed into a cold, hard diamond of resolve. I did not want an apology anymore. I did not want their fake love. I wanted absolute justice. And the beautiful thing about being the sole financial pillar of a dysfunctional family is that when you finally decide to step away, the entire roof collapses directly on their heads. I reached over and pressed the red call button for the nurse. Tamsin walked in a moment later, looking deeply concerned by my sudden movement. "Could you prop my bed up a little?" I asked, my voice barely a raspy whisper. "And I need a charger for my phone. I have some extremely urgent business to take care of." She hesitated, looking at my erratic vital signs on the monitor. "You should be resting, Sloan. Your blood pressure is all over the place. You need to conserve your energy." I managed a weak, grim smile that did not reach my eyes. "Trust me, Tamsin. I am about to lower my blood pressure permanently. I just need to cut out some toxic waste first." But where exactly do you begin dismantling a financial empire built on guilt? The moment my phone hit 15% battery and the charging cable was securely plugged into the wall, I began the systematic demolition of the empire I had built for them. I did not feel sorrow. I did not feel a shred of hesitation. I felt the meticulous, calculated focus I usually reserved for hunting down rogue malware in a corporate server. My family had been a parasitic virus in my life, draining my resources, slowing down my progress, and corrupting my peace of mind. It was time for a total system wipe. I opened my primary banking application. The bright blue screen illuminated the dim, sterile hospital room. First on the list was the emergency credit card. The one currently resting securely in either Orson's leather wallet or Blair's designer handbag in Las Vegas. I navigated to the card management tab. My thumb hovered over the screen for a fraction of a second. The ghost of my old guilt whispered to me, telling me that they were my family, and that if I did this, there would be no going back. I looked at the text message from my father again. The life insurance comment. The ultimate betrayal. I pressed the button labeled Report Card Lost or Stolen. A prompt popped up on the screen asking if I wanted to temporarily freeze the card or cancel it entirely and issue a new number. I selected Cancel Permanently. With a soft tap against the glass screen, the digital lifeline to Vegas was instantly severed. Next was the automatic transfer for Orson and Vera's mortgage. Every first of the month, like clockwork, a hefty sum left my checking account to keep a roof over their heads because they could not manage their own budget. I found the recurring payment under the Scheduled Transfers tab and hit Delete. I did the exact same thing for the auto loan on Orson's luxury SUV. I canceled the auto pay for Blair's downtown apartment rent. I went through the utility bills, the phone plans, the premium streaming services they used daily. Every single financial umbilical cord was cut without mercy. The silence in the hospital room was broken only by the steady beep of my heart monitor and the soft, rhythmic clicks of my phone screen. Each click felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity, breathing fresh air into my collapsing lungs. But I was not finished. The most crucial, protective step still remained. I looked at the time on my screen. It was just past 6 in the morning on the East Coast. My financial advisor, Blythe, was an early riser who practically lived at her desk and thrived on early morning market analysis. I dialed her direct office line. She picked up on the second ring. "Sloan?" Blythe asked, her professional voice laced with immediate surprise. "I heard from your manager that you were in the hospital. What on earth are you doing calling me at this hour? You sound awful." "I have pneumonia and sepsis," I rasped, struggling to get the words out without triggering a coughing fit. "But my mind is perfectly clear. Blythe, I need you to execute a major change on all my accounts immediately. Right now." "What kind of change?" "Remove Orson, Vera, and Blair as beneficiaries on absolutely everything," I instructed, my voice hard and unwavering. "My life insurance policy, my investment portfolios, my retirement funds. All of it. I want their names erased." There was a heavy, stunned pause on the other end of the line. "Sloan, that is a massive alteration to your estate. Usually, we need you physically in the office to sign physical paperwork with a witness, or at least go through a lengthy video verification protocol. Are you sure you are in a state of mind to make this kind of permanent decision?" "I have never been more certain of anything in my entire existence," I said. "They're in Vegas right now, Blythe. They took a luxury vacation on my dime while I am in the intensive care unit fighting for my life. My father just texted me saying he hopes my life insurance pays out soon so they can collect. I am not letting them profit off my death. I need this done today, before the banks open. I heard a sharp, angry intake of breath over the phone. Understood, Blythe said, her tone instantly shifting from professional caution to fierce, protective solidarity. Say no more. I will send you the digital signature forms via our secure encrypted email portal right now. You just need to tap to sign and verify with your face identification. I will personally expedite the processing and override the standard waiting period. Who do you want listed as the new beneficiary? Put my Uncle Declan for now, I said. Just get my parents and sister off the paperwork. I will figure out the rest later. Consider it done, Sloan. Focus on surviving. I have your back on this. I hung up the phone and fell back against the pillows, physically exhausted but mentally triumphant. The encrypted digital forms arrived in my inbox 2 minutes later. I signed them with a trembling finger, verified my identity, and hit submit. It was finished. The wealth they felt so entitled to, the money they were banking on if my organs failed tonight, was now legally out of their reach. I closed my eyes and let my imagination travel across the country to a sunlit luxury resort in Nevada. Right now, it was 3 in the morning over there. They were likely deeply asleep in their premium suite, dreaming of their next shopping spree or their next expensive steak dinner. They had no idea that while they slept, the financial ground beneath their feet had completely vanished. They had no idea they were waking up broke, stranded, and entirely dependent on the survival skills they never bothered to learn. The fever spiked again, pulling me down into a dark, heavy sleep. But for the first time in years, the crushing weight of family obligation was gone. I was finally free. And when the sun rose over the desert, the chaos would officially begin. How long would it take for the illusion to shatter at the casino front desk? The fallout started exactly 12 hours later, precisely when the lunch rush hit the Vegas Strip. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating aggressively against the plastic tray table. The fever had broken slightly, leaving me drenched in cold sweat, but capable of sitting up without feeling like the room was spinning out of control. I grabbed the phone. The screen was a chaotic, glowing wall of notifications. 15 missed calls from Blair. 12 missed calls from Orson. 7 from Vera. A string of frantic text messages filled the screen, evolving rapidly from minor confusion to rising panic to outright explosive rage. Blair, Sloan, why is the card declining? Blair, hello? Pick up the phone. We are at the hotel restaurant and the waiter is looking at us like we are criminals. Orson, fix the credit card right now. This is extremely embarrassing. Call the bank. Vera, Sloan, honey, please call us immediately. There must be a fraud alert on the account because we are out of state. We cannot pay for anything and Hayes is getting annoyed. I stared at the messages, a cold, profoundly satisfied smile touching my dry lips. I adjusted my posture against the stiff hospital pillows, took a slow, painful sip of ice water to soothe my raw throat, and waited. I did not text back. Let them sweat. 2 minutes later, the phone buzzed again in my hand. It was Blair. This time, I swiped right to answer and brought the phone to my ear. What took you so long? Blair shrieked into the phone, her voice echoing shrilly in the quiet hospital room. You need to call the bank immediately. We are standing in the middle of the lobby. Hayes was going to buy a vintage watch at the boutique and the card bounced. It was so humiliating. He is looking at me like I am crazy. Fix it, Sloan. I let her rant for a few more seconds, employing the gray rock technique I had read about in a behavioral psychology journal. I stripped all emotion, anger, and sarcasm from my voice. I did not sound angry. I did not sound hurt. I sounded like an automated customer service representative reading a script. I cannot fix it, Blair, I said flatly. What do you mean you cannot fix it? Just verify the transaction on your app. It is only $6,000 for the watch. It is not a big deal. The card is not frozen for fraud, Blair. It is canceled. Permanently. The account is closed. There was a stunned, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint, ambient noise of slot machines chiming and casino chatter in the background. What? Blair finally whispered, the endless entitlement draining from her voice, replaced by genuine, terrifying shock. Why would you do that? We are in Vegas. We have a dinner reservation at a Michelin star restaurant in an hour. Because it is my money, I replied calmly. And I am no longer funding your luxury vacations while I am fighting for my life in an intensive care unit. Before Blair could respond, I heard a scuffle over the line, the sound of the phone being snatched away, and Orson's booming, authoritative voice took over. Sloan. Orson barked, trying to assert his usual dominance and bully me into submission. I do not know what kind of childish tantrum you are throwing from your hospital bed, but you are embarrassing this family in public. Turn the card back on right this second. We have massive bills to settle here and we are not playing games. I took a deep breath. My lungs still ached fiercely, but the air felt sweeter and cleaner than it had in a very long time. I cannot do that, Orson. The account no longer exists. Do not use that tone with me. I am your father. You owe us respect. You will call the bank right now and you will authorize these charges, or I swear to God. Or what? I interrupted, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy calm that stopped him in his tracks. You will hope I die sooner? The line went dead quiet. He knew exactly what I was referencing. I read your text, Orson. The one where you laughed and said you hoped my life insurance pays out. Well, I have some bad news for your retirement plan. I changed my beneficiaries this morning with Blythe. If I die from this infection, you get nothing. If I live, you get nothing. You are entirely on your own. Have a great time figuring out how to walk back to the East Coast. I hung up the phone and immediately turned on the Do Not Disturb mode. I leaned back, closing my eyes, vividly imagining the spectacular scene unfolding in that opulent casino lobby. I pictured Blair, dressed in expensive designer clothes she did not pay a dime for, trying to explain to her gold-digging fiancé Hayes why her magical well of endless cash had suddenly dried up. Hayes only proposed to her because he thought our family was independently wealthy. Watching that shiny illusion shatter in real time must have been a magnificent sight. I pictured Orson, a man whose entire fragile ego was built on a foundation of my hard-earned money, standing at a front desk, turning bright red with humiliation as a clerk handed him back a useless piece of plastic. He would bluster. He would threaten to speak to a manager. He would demand respect. But casinos do not care about hollow authority or family dynamics. They only care about valid funds. They had taken my resources for granted for so long that they genuinely believed it was their money. They forgot that I was the architect of their entire lifestyle. And an architect can always demolish the building with a push of a button. The nurses came in to check my vitals an hour later. Tamsin looked at the monitor, then at me, and raised an eyebrow in surprise. Well, she said, writing down the numbers on my medical chart. Your blood pressure has stabilized beautifully. I do not know what kind of business you took care of on your phone earlier, but it seems to be working much better than the intravenous antibiotics. I am just cleaning house, Tamsin, I said, resting my head back and smiling for the first time in days. Just taking out the trash. But what happens when the trash refuses to stay on the curb and tries to break back into the house? The following 48 hours were a masterclass in watching a toxic family implode from a comfortable distance. Without the active credit card, my family was effectively stranded in a city meticulously designed to drain every last cent from your wallet. I maintained strict zero contact. I did not answer their incoming calls, but I did listen to the frantic voicemails they left. Their emotional progression was a fascinating psychological study in narcissistic collapse. It moved predictably from aggressive, authoritative demands to desperate, whining bargaining and, finally, to venomous, unhinged attacks. The hotel, realizing the card on file was dead, had locked them out of their premium suite until they could settle the outstanding balance for room service, spa treatments, and minibar charges, which totaled nearly $4,000. Vera was the one who left the most unhinged messages. The carefully crafted mask of the sweet, fragile, victimized mother completely slipped off, revealing the manipulator underneath. "Sloan, you selfish, ungrateful brat," Vera hissed into the voicemail, her voice trembling with raw rage rather than her usual fake tears. "We're sitting in a cheap diner off the strip eating stale pancakes." Hayes packed his bags, left Blair at the hotel lobby, and took a flight back alone because he realized we could not pay for his watch or the room. "You ruined your sister's engagement. You are doing this to punish us because you are jealous of her beauty and happiness. Unlock the card right now or do not ever speak to me again." I deleted the message with a quick swipe of my thumb. The threat of never speaking to her again was not a punishment, it was the ultimate reward I had been searching for. By the fourth day, my white blood cell count had finally returned to a safe, normal range. The sepsis was defeated, and the pneumonia was retreating from my lungs. The attending doctor signed my discharge papers. I walked out of the hospital feeling incredibly fragile, having lost 10 pounds I could not afford to lose, but my inner spirit was forged in unbreakable steel. I took a taxi back to my apartment. It was quiet. No one was there to welcome me home. No one made me soup, but for the first time in my life, the solitude felt like a warm sanctuary rather than a cold prison. I sat on my couch, wrapped in a thick blanket, and wondered how many people out there endure this exact kind of silent abuse. How many of you listening right now have compromised your own mental health and financial well-being just to keep the peace with family members who would gladly sell you out for a weekend vacation? It is a terrifying realization, understanding that the people supposedly meant to protect you are actually your greatest predators. I made myself a cup of herbal tea, opened my laptop, and decided it was time for the next phase of consequences. I logged into the online portal for the utility company that serviced Orson and Vera's house. The account was fully in my name, linked directly to my credit score, because Orson had ruined his credit years ago with terrible investments and unpaid loans. I clicked on the service termination tab. A warning prompt appeared on the screen, stating that shutting off power could take 24 hours. I confirmed the request without blinking. Next, I terminated the high-speed internet service. Then, the premium cable television package. Finally, I logged into the auto insurance provider and completely removed Orson's luxury SUV from my policy. He was officially driving uninsured, in a car he could no longer afford the monthly payments for. I was systematically, ruthlessly dismantling the fake upper-middle-class life they had flaunted to their neighborhood friends. They wanted to act like royalty? Let them see exactly how the castle runs without the peasant funding the treasury. Later that evening, I received a text message from my uncle Declan. Declan was Orson's younger brother, a pragmatic, hard-working electrician who had always kept a healthy, safe distance from our family's constant drama. He was the only relative who ever treated me like a human being rather than a bank vault. Declan heard the Vegas trip turned into a massive disaster. Orson called me begging for a personal loan to buy 3 economy plane tickets home. Said you lost your mind and cut them off completely. Me, I was in the ICU with sepsis. They knew I was dying. They went to a casino anyway. Orson texted me saying he hoped my life insurance would pay out. Declan, Jesus Christ, Sloan. I am so incredibly sorry. Good for you for cutting the cord on those leeches. I told him I did not have the cash to spare. Let them take a Greyhound bus across the country. You focus on recovering. Reading Declan's message brought a genuine, warm smile to my face. The external validation was absolutely crucial. When you deal with professional gaslighters for so long, you start to question your own sanity. You wonder if you are overreacting or being too sensitive. Having an outside observer confirm the cruelty of their actions grounded my resolve. I went to sleep that night to the soothing sound of rain against my bedroom window, feeling profoundly safe. Meanwhile, somewhere in a cheap, run-down motel outside of Vegas, my family was learning the hard way that arrogance is a luxury only the truly independent can afford. But how far would they go to force me back into submission? The weekend passed in blessed, uninterrupted silence. My body was slowly recovering its strength. I started eating solid food again, took short walks around my neighborhood to rebuild my lung capacity, and prepared to return to my normal life. But I knew the war was far from over. My family was like a cornered, desperate animal. They would not simply accept defeat and move on. They would try to regain control, using every manipulative tactic in their extensive arsenal. Monday morning, I scheduled an urgent, in-person meeting with Gideon, my attorney. Gideon was a sharp, clinical man who specialized in estate planning and family law. He viewed intense emotions as messy variables and preferred dealing strictly in documented facts and hard evidence. That was exactly what I needed on my side. I sat across from him in his minimalist, glass-walled office, handing over a thick folder of documents. I need to legally revoke the power of attorney I granted to my parents 3 years ago, I told him, my voice steady and professional. I also need to restructure my entire estate plan. They are to be explicitly disinherited from any future claims. Gideon adjusted his glasses and meticulously reviewed the paperwork. You understand that revoking a power of attorney requires formal legal notification to the agents involved? We will have to serve them with legal notice. Serve them, I said firmly. Send it via certified mail with signature required. I want a solid, undeniable paper trail for everything from this point forward. Gideon looked up, catching the cold intensity in my eyes. Family dispute? He asked mildly, his pen hovering over the legal pad. Financial extraction, I corrected him. I am permanently closing the mine. He nodded, asking no further personal questions, and immediately began drafting the revocation forms. Leaving his office, I felt another heavy layer of anxiety lift from my shoulders. The legal fortress was built. They could not touch my assets, they could not make medical decisions on my behalf if I ended up in the hospital again, and they could not claim ignorance in front of a judge. But dealing with toxic families is never just about the law. It is about the intense social pressure. And the flying monkeys were about to descend on my doorstep. I walked into the marble lobby of my apartment building that afternoon to find Aunt Cordelia pacing nervously near the elevators. Cordelia was Vera's older sister, a woman who thrived on neighborhood gossip and believed that family loyalty trumped basic human decency. She was the family's designated loudspeaker, sent to shame anyone who stepped out of line. Sloan, Cordelia gasped, rushing toward me with dramatic, exaggerated flair. Look at you, you look so pale and thin. Your mother has been worried sick about you. I stopped, maintaining a strict physical distance, crossing my arms over my chest. Did Vera send you here, Cordelia? She pressed her hand to her chest, looking deeply offended by the accusation. I came because I care about you. Sloan, what you are doing to your parents right now is unconscionable. They just got off a horrible, exhausting bus ride from Nevada. They come home to find the electricity shut off and the internet gone. They are sitting in the dark freezing. Your father is a proud man, and you are humiliating him on purpose. I stared at her, employing the gray rock method once again. Orson has a job. Vera is fully capable of working. They can pay their own electric bill like normal adults. They're your family. Cordelia shrieked, her voice echoing loudly in the lobby, drawing the attention of the security guard. You make more than enough money to help them out. After everything they sacrificed to raise you, leaving them in the dark over a silly misunderstanding is cruel. You need to apologize and turn the power back on today. I reached into my tote bag. I had anticipated this exact confrontation. I pulled out a thick, stapled packet of paper. It was a consolidated bank statement I had printed out earlier that morning. Do you know what this is, Cordelia? I asked, holding the packet up so she could see the banking logo. This is a complete record of every dollar I have transferred to Orson, Vera, and Blair over the last 36 months. Car payments, mortgage payments, rent, cosmetic surgeries, luxury vacations. I flipped directly to the last page and pointed to the highlighted total at the bottom. $124,000, I read aloud, making sure the number echoed clearly in the lobby. I have given them over $120,000 in 3 years. While I was lying in a hospital bed with failing organs, Orson sent me a text hoping my life insurance would pay out so they could collect more money. Cordelia stared at the highlighted number on the page. Her jaw visibly slackened. The righteous indignation completely melted off her face, replaced by stunned, embarrassed silence. She had no idea of the sheer scale of the financial abuse. Vera had likely spun a fake story about me being a stingy, rebellious daughter withholding a minor favor. So I continued, my voice cold and unwavering. You can go back to sitting in the dark with them, Cordelia. But if you ever come to my home again to lecture me about sacrifice, I will hand copies of these exact statements to everyone at your country club. Are we clear? Cordelia swallowed hard, backed away slowly, and practically ran out the revolving glass doors. I pressed the elevator button, a genuine smile breaking across my face. The fortress was holding strong, but the real chaos was just brewing. Because Blair, stripped of her fake billionaire fiancé and her luxury apartment, was about to launch a desperate counterattack online. Welcome to the channel Revenge Served. If you are enjoying this story of ultimate payback, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below with the name of the city you are living in right now. Every single comment helps this video reach more people who might need the courage to stand up to toxic family members. Thank you so much for your support. When you strip a narcissist of their unearned resources, their initial reaction is always panic. But when you strip a golden child of her perceived social status, her reaction is pure, unfiltered venom. Blair had always lived her life as if she were starring in a reality television show where she was the undisputed protagonist. She curated an aesthetic of effortless wealth, posting photos of organic lattes, designer handbags, and luxury vacations. She built a following of thousands of strangers who validated her existence with heart emojis and envious comments. So, when the financial rug was pulled out from under her, and her fiancé Hayes packed his bags and left her standing in a Vegas lobby with zero funds, she did the only thing she knew how to do. She turned herself into a professional victim on the internet. It started on a Tuesday evening. My phone buzzed with a notification from an old high school acquaintance. The message simply read, "Have you seen what your sister is posting about you?" I opened my social media application and navigated to Blair's public profile. There, pinned to the very top of her feed, was a lengthy, dramatic post accompanied by a black and white photo of her looking out a window, appearing distressed and fragile. The text read, "It is breaking my heart to write this, but I need to speak my truth. My sister, who has always resented my happiness, has decided to financially abandon our elderly parents and me in our darkest hour. She makes an incredible salary in the tech industry, but she has turned her back on the very people who sacrificed everything to raise her. She canceled my parents' emergency credit cards while we were trying to figure out a family crisis, leaving us stranded. She even shut off the power to my childhood home. Money changes people. It makes them cold, cruel, and unrecognizable. Please pray for my family as we try to survive this betrayal." Below the post, she had linked a crowdfunding campaign titled, "Help a Loving Family Survive Betrayal." I read the post 3 times. The audacity was breathtaking. She had flawlessly inverted the truth, casting the parasites as the victims and the host as the villain. Within hours, the post had accumulated hundreds of comments. Strangers were calling me a monster, a sociopath, and an ungrateful daughter. People who did not know the first thing about my life were leaving furious remarks, saying they hoped my employer would see the post and fire me. The digital mob was forming, and Blair was orchestrating it with the precision of a seasoned manipulator. For a brief moment, a wave of the old anxiety washed over me. The fear of being misunderstood, the terror of public shame. But then I remembered the sterile smell of the intensive care unit. I remembered the text message from my father wishing for my life insurance payout. The anxiety vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating determination. If Blair wanted to drag our private family dynamics into the public square, I was more than willing to provide the audience with the actual facts. I did not have to say a single word. The beautiful thing about building genuine relationships with people who respect your character is that they will fiercely defend you when you are attacked. The first person to step into the digital battlefield was my uncle Declan. Declan did not deal in subtlety. He posted a comment directly under Blair's tearful paragraph. Declan wrote, "Blair, you are a liar. Your sister was in the intensive care unit with sepsis, fighting for her life. You and your parents took her emergency credit card and flew to Las Vegas for a luxury vacation while she was dying. Orson texted her saying he hoped she died so he could collect her life insurance. That is why she cut you off. Get a real job and stop begging for money on the internet. The tone of the comments section shifted instantly. But the final nail in the coffin came from my colleagues. A senior analyst at my cybersecurity firm, a woman named Maya who had visited me in the hospital, uploaded a screenshot. It was the exact photo Orson had posted of himself and Vera by the Vegas pool, holding drinks, with the timestamp clearly showing they were partying while I was hospitalized. Maya added the caption, "Here are the grieving parents in their darkest hour. Notice the martinis." The backlash against Blair was instantaneous and brutal. The very same strangers who had offered her sympathy just an hour prior were now tearing her apart in the comments. They called out the crowdfunding campaign as a fraudulent scam. They demanded she take the post down and apologize. People began tagging the hotel in Vegas, mocking her fake wealthy lifestyle. The internet, which she had used as a weapon to destroy my reputation, had turned around and swallowed her whole. Instead of apologizing or admitting the truth, Blair panicked. She frantically deleted the negative comments, but they were appearing faster than she could manage. Within 45 minutes, she locked her entire profile, making it private, and took down the crowdfunding campaign. Later that night, I received a text from Declan. "Hayes saw the comments," Declan wrote. "He realized the money was yours all along. He officially broke off the engagement. Blair is having a meltdown at your parents' house." I turned off my phone, made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and watched the city lights blink outside my window. The golden child had finally flown too close to the sun, and her wax wings had melted entirely. But the war was escalating. My parents, now facing a massive public humiliation on top of their financial ruin, were desperate. And desperate people rarely act with logic. They act with force. The silence lasted exactly 4 days. By Thursday morning, I had fully returned to my normal routine. I was back at my desk at the cybersecurity firm, sipping black coffee and analyzing a complex data breach for a corporate client. The environment of my office was pristine, professional, and governed by strict protocols. It was a place where emotions were checked at the door, and data ruled supreme. It was my safe haven. At 11:15 in the morning, my desk phone rang. It was the front desk security guard, a former military man named Marcus who took his job very seriously. "Sloan," Marcus said, his voice tense and professional. "There is a situation in the main lobby. An older couple is here demanding to see you. They claim to be your parents. I told them you require an appointment for personal visitors, but the man is becoming verbally aggressive and refusing to leave the premises." My stomach plummeted, a cold not forming instantly. They had brought the chaos to my professional doorstep. Orson and Vera were trying to force a confrontation in front of my colleagues, banking on the idea that I would be too embarrassed to make a scene and would simply give them what they wanted just to make them go away. They fundamentally misunderstood who I had become. "Do not let them pass the security turnstiles, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice remarkably level. "I am coming down right now." I stood up, smoothed the wrinkles from my tailored blazer, and walked toward the elevators. I did not feel the familiar urge to shrink myself. I felt like a general walking onto a battlefield I had already scouted. When the elevator doors opened to the expansive glass lobby, the sound of Orson's booming voice echoed off the marble walls. "I demand you call her down here this instant." Orson was shouting, his face flushed an ugly shade of crimson. He was wearing an ill-fitting suit, trying to project authority, but he just looked frantic. Vera stood next to him, clutching her purse, her eyes darting around the lobby to see who was watching. "I am her father. You cannot keep me away from my own daughter." "Sir, you need to lower your voice, or I will be forced to escort you outside," Marcus replied firmly, standing between them and the security gates. "Orson," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a steel blade. They both spun around. Vera's face instantly shifted into a mask of tragic relief. She rushed toward the security barrier, reaching her hands out as if to embrace me through the glass. Sloan. Oh, thank goodness, Vera cried, her voice carrying a theatrical tremor. We have been so worried about you. You will not answer our calls. You have to stop this nonsense right now. Blair is devastated, your father is stressed, and we are sitting in a house with no electricity. Please, honey, just come outside and talk to us. We are family. Several of my colleagues, holding coffee cups, had paused near the elevators to watch the spectacle. I could feel their eyes on me. In the past, this public display of dysfunction would have paralyzed me with shame. Today, it merely fueled my resolve. We have nothing to talk about, Vera, I said, stopping a safe distance away from the security desk. My tone was conversational, yet loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear perfectly. You made your priorities clear when you went to Las Vegas, while I was in the intensive care unit. That was a misunderstanding. Orson bellowed, pointing a thick finger at me. We thought you were recovering. You are punishing us for taking a much-needed vacation. You turn my electricity off? You humiliate your sister online? You are an arrogant, ungrateful brat, and you are going to restore my accounts right now, or I will make sure everyone in this building knows exactly what kind of daughter you are. I looked at him, studying the desperate, angry man who had spent my money for years. He thought his anger was a weapon. He did not realize he was shooting blanks. You are threatening to ruin my reputation, Orson? I asked smoothly. You want everyone here to know what kind of daughter I am? Fine. Let us tell them. I turned slightly to address Marcus and the few colleagues standing nearby. For the last 3 years, I have paid their mortgage, their car loans, and my sister's rent, I stated clearly, laying out the facts like I was presenting a data report in a boardroom. I gave them over $120,000. 2 weeks ago, I almost died from sepsis. They used my emergency credit card to fund a casino trip instead of visiting me. When I asked why they were not at the hospital, this man, my father, texted me saying he hoped my life insurance would finally pay out. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the lobby. A female colleague near the elevator gasped softly, covering her mouth. Marcus's expression hardened into pure disgust as he stared at Orson. Vera's face drained of color. The theatrical tears vanished instantly, replaced by sheer panic as she realized the public narrative had slipped entirely from her grasp. Orson opened his mouth to shout another defense, but he could not find the words. The truth, spoken aloud without an ounce of emotion or apology, had stripped him of his power. I am not your bank account anymore, I said, turning my gaze back to Orson. I am a stranger to you. If you ever set foot on this property again, I will have you arrested for trespassing and harassment. I looked at Marcus. Marcus, these individuals are not welcome here. If they do not leave the building in 10 seconds, please call the police. Understood, Sloan, Marcus said, stepping forward with his hand resting on his radio. Sir, ma'am, it is time to leave. Orson glared at me, his eyes filled with a venomous, impotent rage. He grabbed Vera by the arm, turned around, and marched out through the revolving glass doors into the bustling city street. I watched them walk away, their figures getting smaller and smaller until they disappeared into the crowd. I took a deep breath, nodded to Marcus, and walked back to the elevators. The ambush had failed utterly. But they were about to face a much larger, much more permanent eviction than being thrown out of my office lobby. When you stop paying a mortgage that you never legally owed in the first place, the banking institutions move with a swift, merciless efficiency. It had been 4 weeks since I severed the financial ties. 4 weeks of unpaid bills piling up on the kitchen counter of my childhood home. Without my monthly transfers, Orson and Vera had zero safety net. Orson's modest salary barely covered their basic groceries, and the mounting interest on the credit cards they had maxed out before I gave them mine. The reality of their situation hit them on a crisp Tuesday morning. I knew exactly when it happened because my phone, which had been relatively quiet, suddenly exploded with voicemails. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a security protocol, when I finally decided to listen to the messages. I put my headphones on and hit play. The first voicemail was from Vera. The theatrical anger was gone, replaced by a raw, guttural panic that sent a chill down my spine. Sloan, please, Vera sobbed into the phone, her breathing ragged and uneven. Please pick up the phone. A man just came to the door. He taped a notice to the front window. They are foreclosing on the house. The bank says we are 90 days past due. I do not understand. You always paid it on the first of the month. They say we have 30 days to vacate or pay the entire past due balance. Orson is throwing things in the living room. We are going to be homeless, Sloan. Please, you have to fix this. I am begging you. I am your mother. I paused the recording. 90 days past due? That made zero logical sense. I had only stopped making the mortgage payments 4 weeks ago. Even if they missed the current month, they should only be 30 days behind. The bank does not initiate aggressive foreclosure proceedings that quickly unless there is a much deeper, pre-existing financial catastrophe. My instincts as a data investigator kicked in. I opened a new secure browser window, logged into a public records database, and ran a property search on their home address. The results loaded on my screen, revealing a financial truth so shocking I actually had to read the numbers twice to believe them. Orson had not just been relying on my monthly payments for the primary mortgage. 2 years ago, without telling anyone, he had secretly taken out a massive second mortgage on the property. He had borrowed $250,000 against the equity of the house. He likely used that money to fund his disastrous day trading habit in the stock market, trying to prove he was a financial genius. He had hidden the second mortgage entirely, using the money I sent him to quietly cover the interest payments on the primary loan while the secondary loan defaulted. By cutting off my monthly transfers, I had simply removed the final wooden peg holding up a crumbling house of cards. They were over $300,000 in debt. The house was financially underwater, and the bank was finally coming to collect. The second voicemail was from Orson. His tone was drastically different from Vera's. It was not begging. It was a desperate, terrifying threat from a man who realized he had destroyed his own life. Listen to me, you ungrateful little monster, Orson snarled into the receiver, his voice thick with venom. I know you did this. I know you planned this to humiliate me. You think you are so smart sitting in your fancy office? You are going to wire $60,000 to my account by tomorrow morning to halt this foreclosure. If you do not, I swear on my life, I will call the chief executive officer of your company. I will call your human resources department. I will tell them you are mentally unstable. I will tell them you stole money from us. I will burn your precious career to the ground until you are begging for a job at a fast food restaurant. Wire the money, Sloan. I sat in my chair, the threat ringing in my ears. He was willing to fabricate lies and destroy my livelihood just to avoid facing the consequences of his own disastrous financial choices. He truly believed that if he intimidated me enough, the old, compliant Sloan would magically return and write a check. He was incredibly wrong. I did not call him back. I did not wire the money. Instead, I picked up my phone, dialed my attorney Gideon's direct line, and forwarded him the audio files of both voicemails. Gideon, I said when he answered. I hope you are having a good morning. I just forwarded you a threat of corporate extortion and harassment from Orson. He is threatening to fabricate lies to my employer to get me fired unless I pay him $60,000 to stop his house from being foreclosed on. I heard Gideon sigh, the sound of a lawyer who recognized a perfectly handed legal victory. I am listening to the audio file right now, Sloan. This is textbook extortion. It is exactly the kind of documented threat we need. I want a restraining order, Gideon, I stated clearly. Against all three of them. Orson, Vera, and Blair. I want them legally barred from contacting me, coming to my home, or approaching my place of employment. I want an impenetrable legal wall between their chaos and my life. Given the documented history, the office incident, and this explicit threat to your employment, I can petition the judge for an emergency temporary restraining order by tomorrow afternoon, Gideon replied efficiently. We will have a full hearing for a permanent order within 2 weeks. Are you prepared to face them in a courtroom? I am ready to bury this, I said. They thought they could use my career as leverage. They did not realize they had just handed me the exact legal ammunition I needed to lock them out of my life forever. The foreclosure was inevitable. The house they loved more than they ever loved me was gone. The county courthouse was a grand, imposing building with high vaulted ceilings and cold marble floors. It was an environment designed to intimidate, to remind citizens of the sheer weight of the law. I walked through the heavy wooden doors of courtroom number 4 wearing a sharp, tailored navy suit. I felt composed, focused, and entirely detached from the emotional turbulence of my past. Gideon walked beside me, carrying a thick, black leather briefcase that contained the entire documented history of my family's dysfunction. I took my seat at the petitioner's table. Across the aisle, sitting at the respondents' table, were Orson, Vera, and Blair. They had clearly coordinated their outfits to present a specific narrative to the judge. They dressed conservatively, aiming for an appearance of humble, respectable middle-class citizens who were tragically misunderstood. Vera wore a modest cardigan, her hair tied back, clutching a tissue in her hands. Orson wore a slightly faded suit, trying to look like a hard-working, exhausted father. Blair wore a simple dress, keeping her head bowed, playing the role of the innocent younger sister. It was a performance worthy of a theater stage. But courtrooms do not operate on performances, they operate on evidence. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her late 50s named Honorable Davis, took her seat at the bench. She adjusted her reading glasses, opened the case file, and looked down at the two tables. This is a hearing for a permanent order of protection filed by Sloan against Orson, Vera, and Blair, Judge Davis announced, her voice echoing in the quiet room. Counsel, you may proceed. Orson's lawyer, a cheap attorney he likely hired on a payment plan, stood up first. He launched into a predictable, emotionally manipulative opening statement. He painted a picture of a tight-knit family going through a temporary financial hardship. He claimed that I was a highly stressed corporate worker who had suffered a minor mental breakdown in the hospital and was now lashing out at my loving parents over a simple misunderstanding about a vacation. He explicitly argued that granting a restraining order would irreparably destroy the sacred bond of family. I did not react. I simply watched Gideon slowly stand up, open his leather briefcase, and begin laying out the exhibits. Gideon did not use emotional language. He used cold, hard data. Your Honor, Gideon began, his voice smooth and authoritative. The respondents are not a loving family experiencing a misunderstanding. They're individuals who have engaged in a sustained campaign of financial extraction, emotional abuse, public defamation, and criminal extortion against my client. Gideon handed the first stack of documents to the bailiff to pass to the judge. Exhibit A, medical records proving my client was in the intensive care unit battling severe sepsis. Alongside this is Exhibit B, a verified screenshot of a text message from the respondent, Orson, sent while my client was hospitalized, stating, "At least your life insurance will finally pay out." The judge read the text message. She looked up over her glasses, her eyes narrowing sharply as she fixed her gaze on Orson. Orson physically shrank in his chair. Exhibit C, Gideon continued ruthlessly. Security logs and sworn affidavits from the front desk personnel at my client's corporate office, detailing an incident where Orson and Vera bypassed security protocols, created a public disturbance, and verbally harassed my client in front of her colleagues. Vera began to softly cry, dabbing her eyes with the tissue, trying to elicit sympathy. Judge Davis ignored her entirely. And finally, Exhibit D, Gideon said, playing the audio file of the voicemail directly into the courtroom microphone. The sound of Orson's voice filled the room, angrily threatening to call my chief executive officer and fabricate lies to destroy my career unless I wired him $60,000. When the audio finished playing, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. The narrative of the humble, misunderstood parents had been entirely obliterated. Judge Davis closed the file folder with a sharp, decisive snap. She looked directly at Orson, Vera, and Blair. "I have heard enough," Judge Davis stated coldly. "The evidence presented here is overwhelming. Threatening to destroy a family member's livelihood through fabricated corporate complaints in order to extort money is not a family misunderstanding. It is targeted, malicious harassment." She turned her attention to me, her expression softening just a fraction. The petitioner has clearly demonstrated a reasonable fear for her professional and psychological safety. The permanent order of protection is granted. Judge Davis looked back at my family, her voice dropping to a stern warning. You are hereby ordered to remain 500 feet away from Sloan, her residence, and her place of employment. You are prohibited from contacting her via phone, email, text, or third-party intermediaries. You are prohibited from posting about her on any social media platforms. If you violate this order, you will be arrested and charged with contempt of court. Are we clear? Orson's face was pale, his jaw clenched tightly. Yes, Your Honor, he muttered. Yes, Your Honor, Vera whispered, her fake tears drying up instantly as the reality of the legal boundary set in. I stood up, gathered my bag, and walked down the aisle toward the heavy wooden doors. I did not look back at them. I did not need to. The invisible chains were finally broken, replaced by a legal shield. The courtroom doors closed behind me, shutting them out of my life for good. When you finally eliminate the sources of constant emotional and financial drain from your life, the universe has a remarkable way of rushing in to fill the newly created empty space with genuine opportunities. The day after the restraining order was finalized, I woke up without the familiar, heavy knot of anxiety sitting in my stomach. There was no buzzing phone demanding immediate attention. There was no news smear post on the internet to screenshot for my lawyer. There was no pounding on my apartment door. There was just profound, beautiful, undisturbed quiet. It was the kind of quiet that makes you truly realize how deafening the chaos used to be. A week later, I received a phone call from Merrick, the chief executive officer of a rapidly expanding cybersecurity startup I had consulted for in the past. Merrick was a brilliant, no-nonsense leader who valued results above all else. Sloan, Merrick said, skipping the small talk. I know you are currently comfortable at your firm, but I have an opportunity you need to hear about. We are building an entirely new division focused exclusively on advanced data forensics. I need a director of security to build the team from the ground up. The board authorized me to offer you the position. He named a starting salary that was exactly double what I was currently making, putting me at $200,000 a year, complete with generous stock options and full executive benefits. They had reviewed a complex breach I had solved earlier that year and decided they wanted my mind leading their division. I did not even need to think about it. I accepted the offer on the spot. My first day at the new corporate headquarters felt like stepping into a parallel universe. I had a spacious corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. I had a dedicated budget, a team of brilliant engineers, and a leadership structure that actually respected my expertise. At a welcome lunch, Merrick leaned across the table and said, "The work you do here is vital. We do not take your talent lightly." For the first time in my professional life, I was being compensated and valued exactly for what I was worth. Meanwhile, as my career ascended into the stratosphere, my family was unraveling at a spectacular speed. I never went looking for information about them, but my uncle Declan, one of the few relatives who had supported me, occasionally kept me updated during our monthly coffee meetups. The bank finalized the foreclosure last week, Declan told me one afternoon, stirring his coffee slowly. They were officially evicted. Orson tried to ask me if they could stay in my guest room, but I told him my house was full. He is furious. They had to rent a tiny, run-down one-bedroom apartment in a terrible neighborhood on the edge of town. I listened, feeling a strange sense of detachment. It was like hearing a news story about strangers. It gets worse, Declan continued, shaking his head. Orson had to take a job working the night shift at a logistics warehouse driving a forklift just to pay the rent. Vera has been posting vague, depressing statuses online about how blood is not thicker than water, but nobody interacts with her posts anymore. And Blair? Without your money paying her downtown rent, she had to move onto a friend's couch. She tried to get a job at a high-end retail boutique, but she quit after 3 days because she said standing on her feet was too degrading. Then came the story that actually made me laugh out loud in the coffee shop. Vera got arrested last month, Declan said, a grim smile touching his lips. She was caught shoplifting at the local grocery store. a block of expensive imported cheese, and some high-end makeup. When the store manager caught her, she started crying and literally tried to blame you. She told the police that her wealthy, evil daughter had abandoned her and she was starving. Did it work? I asked, raising an eyebrow. No, Declan chuckled. The arresting officer did not care about her family drama. She was charged with petty theft. The story made the local community newsletter. The headline was "Local Woman Blames Estranged Daughter for Cheese Theft." Everyone in their old neighborhood knows exactly what kind of people they are now. I did not feel a sense of triumphant joy exactly. I felt a deep, unshakable certainty that I had made the right call. While they were busy blaming me for their own inevitable downfall, I was building a life worth protecting. I moved out of my apartment and purchased a beautiful modern house in the hills, surrounded by trees and silence. I adopted a golden retriever named Cooper, who greeted me at the door every evening with pure, unconditional love. I joined a weekend hiking group, learned how to cook gourmet meals, and eventually started dating a kind, intelligent architect who listened to my past without judgment. My life was entirely my own. But there was still one final chapter left to close. It had been nearly 2 full years since that disastrous Vegas weekend when I finally saw him again. It was a rainy Sunday evening. I was walking down the frozen foods aisle of a large discount grocery store a few towns over from where I lived, picking up ingredients for a dinner recipe. The store was quiet, the fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. I turned the corner near the frozen vegetables and stopped in my tracks. Standing 10 feet away from me was Orson. He was holding a crumpled coupon booklet in one hand, staring blankly at a row of generic, heavily discounted frozen dinners. The man I remembered was loud, imposing, and obsessed with projecting an image of wealthy superiority. The man standing before me now looked drastically different. He looked physically smaller somehow. His shoulders were severely hunched, his hair had turned entirely gray, and his face was lined with deep, permanent exhaustion. He wore a faded, stained warehouse uniform jacket. Life had chipped away at his massive ego, piece by piece, leaving behind a hollow shell of a man. He turned his head to grab a box of frozen peas and our eyes met. I did not flinch. I did not turn around and run. I simply stood my ground, holding my shopping basket, my face a mask of calm indifference. Orson's expression shifted violently from surprise to a flash of the old anger, and then, surprisingly, to a deep, heavy resignation. He slowly put the frozen peas back into the freezer case and took a tentative step toward me, being careful to maintain a respectful distance. He remembered the restraining order. "You look good, Sloane," Orson said quietly. His voice lacked the booming authority it used to carry. It sounded raspy and tired. "You look very healthy." "I am," I replied evenly, my voice giving nothing away. He hesitated, looking down at his worn-out boots, before speaking again. "I know we messed up. I know we failed you when you were in the hospital. I do not expect you to forgive us, and I am not asking for anything. But I wanted you to know that sitting in that warehouse every night, driving that machine, I finally understand exactly what we lost." It was the very first time in my entire 28 years of life that Orson had taken genuine responsibility for his actions. There were no excuses. There was no spin. There was no attempt to blame my reaction or manipulate the narrative. He was simply stating a painful, irreversible fact. I looked at the tired, broken man who used to terrorize my bank account and my self-esteem. I waited for the anger to rise, or the old guilt to surface, but nothing came. The emotional cord had been cut so thoroughly that I felt nothing but a cold, distant pity. "Thank you for saying that," I told him, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. "But understanding what you lost does not undo the damage you caused. And it does not rebuild the bridge you burned." He nodded slowly, a profound sadness settling over his features. "I know. I hope someday you might give us a tiny chance to show we have learned from this." "Maybe someday." "Maybe someday," I said, though we both knew the chances of that happening were absolutely zero. Right now, I am focused on the family I am building with people who actually care about me. I gave him a brief, polite nod, turned around, and walked away down the aisle. I did not look back. As I walked out into the cool evening rain to my car, I felt an unexpected wave of profound peace wash over me. I felt pity for a man who had traded the genuine love of his daughter for the illusion of control and wealth, and ultimately ended up with neither. That night, I sat on the back patio of my beautiful new home. My golden retriever, Cooper, was asleep quietly at my feet. The city lights twinkled softly in the valley below, a quiet, glowing reminder of how far I had come from that dark, terrifying hospital room. I thought about that sick, frightened girl in the intensive care unit, fever burning through her veins, desperately believing her family would come save her. I thought about the cruel text message that shattered that childish illusion forever. At least your life insurance will finally pay out. And I thought about how, in that precise moment of ultimate betrayal, I made the incredibly difficult choice to choose myself. The strange thing about revenge is that the absolute best kind is not about actively hurting those who hurt you. It is not about plotting their downfall or yelling in their faces. The purest form of revenge is about living so incredibly well, so successfully, and so peacefully that your permanent absence from their lives becomes a devastating curse to them and a beautiful blessing to you. They assumed losing me would be a temporary inconvenience. They assumed I would eventually crawl back to them, checkbook in hand, begging for their toxic forgiveness. Instead, they lost the absolute best thing that had ever happened to them. And I finally got the beautiful, peaceful life I had been far too busy funding theirs to realize I actually deserved. That is a trade I will make every single day for the rest of my life. Have you ever had to cut off toxic family members to save your own future? Do you think I was right to walk away from my father in the grocery store, or should I have given him one last chance? If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below sharing your own experiences. Every single comment helps this video reach more people who might need the courage to stand up to toxic family members and reclaim their lives. Thank you so much for your support.